Okay, let's look at standard costs and variances. Now, this section has just a little bit of math in it, but I'll show you how to set it up in a spreadsheet. So the math is pretty simple. But what we're looking at is standard costs, which is what we expect things to cost, and variances to that, which is what they actually cost. And we're going to look at them in two different ways. We're going to look at them with regard to the price, what we expected to pay, and what we actually pay, and how much we used, the actual amount of hours or material that we used, and how much we thought we'd use. So we're going to break those into two different categories and do some math on figuring out how far off we were and where we were off. So that's the overview of what we're trying to do. So let's look at standard costs and variances. A standard price is how much we should pay for each unit of input, and a standard quantity is how much of each input should be used to make a product or service. So if we use an example of, say, a McDonald's Big Mac, how much meat is in a McDonald's Big Mac? Well, not very much, but there is a standard quantity for that meat, and of course there's a standard price that you would pay for that. So you would be able to differentiate your standard price. Did you pay the right amount for the meat that you used? And the standard quantity, did you use the right amount of meat? Now, since McDonald's is incredibly standardized, you would imagine the variance is very small. But in other things, say a local sandwich shop or a local pizzeria, how much pepperoni did you use and how much did you pay for it would be a variance that you'd want to pay attention to with regard to your costs. And of course, it gets much bigger as you start to get into larger operations. So that's just one example. Let's keep going and turn into what we're talking about with standard for direct materials. So as I said, we're going to look at direct materials, direct labor, and overhead in these variances. There's three different sets of variances we're going to look at. This first one's direct materials. So the standard price per unit is the final delivered cost of materials net of discount. So that's the standard price. And the standard quantity per unit is summarized in the bill of materials. So the standard quantity would be how many slices of bread in a Big Mac? 3. How many slices of bread in a quarter pounder of cheese? 2, right? So we have direct materials. Then we go on to direct labor standards. It's the standard rate per hour is the hourly rate. So it's usually a single rate, and they usually mix the various rates together. So even though you have employees paid differently, you come up with an overall standard rate for the average for the worker. And then the standard hours is how many hours are used to do a specific operation. So you would use a time and motion study, or you would just know that it takes you 15 minutes to do this operation and 10 minutes to do this operation, or it could even be closer than that we churn out 60 of these per hour, which means it's 1 per minute. So we could look at it that way too. Under variable manufacturing overhead standards, we come up with a rate that is proportional to the predetermined overhead. So we predetermine the overhead, and we assume that we're going to spend X number of dollars per overhead for every unit that we produce, and so we put that into the price standard. And then the quantity standard is an activity that is based on how many hours we're actually going to work to create that product. So again, labor standards and overhead, variable overhead is accounted for with regard to hours. Direct material is regard to amount of material. This can be reflected in a standard cost card. It would look like this, where you have direct materials at 3 pounds, $4 a pound is $12. Direct labor is 2.5 hours at $14 per hour, $35, and the variable overhead rate is $3 per hour for 2.5 hours. So a standard cost card is $54.50 for this particular product. So this product should cost us $54.50. That's what it should cost us. Now you go through production for a month and you find out what it actually did cost you, and you compare the two. So that's what you'd be looking for, is the differences between the two. And in the next few videos, I'll show you how to do that math.